Ah, hello James.
Hello.
Welcome to the latest dyno update. Last time we all tuned in, all the exhaust extraction and most of the cell was a big pile of metal outside and on my trailer and stacked up here, there and everywhere. And we'd only just knocked a hole in this wall. Come through and see the hole now.
Hole.
Yes, hole. Because the YouTubers won't know this, this is dyno console number 3. If you'd tune into earlier videos, you know I bought 2. Well, I've now bought a 3rd one. I paid a trip to Phil, who owns Connaught Performance Engineers. He's recently updated his Superflow dyno to run the latest spec 902 equipment. So what he had for sale was a known good working console and all the electrics that go with it. Not knowing the history of the electronics I'd bought, it seemed a too good opportunity to miss. Bear in mind this kit is basically obsolete. To be able to buy a known working good one is a major plus. Just to prove, I can turn it on. And there is life. And what it's actually showing there is a torque loading. The dyno at the moment hasn't got a load cell plugged into it. So that is the default figure it shows when the load cell's unplugged, which is a major plus point because from that aspect it's working as it should do. The load cell on the dyno itself has had the wires to it cut. So either they were adapted to fit something else or that load cell doesn't work. The safest thing for me to do was obtain a new load cell. Contacting Superflow in America, they came back to me with a price and availability, but wanted to know what torque loading the console was set up for. And they came back and said, leave the cell unplugged, put the display in torque, turn it on, tell us whether it reads 1000 or 2000. As you can see from the display there, it reads 1356. And I emailed back to America, and this is all very long-winded because obviously they're the far side of the planet and everything's very delayed. And they come back and said, yeah, that makes sense. That is £1,000 in newtons. We know the console is given the correct torque number, considering it's not got a cell plugged in. And I now know the console can operate part of the cart. And in fact, if I press the starter button, it will spin the dyno, and we've got an RPM reading. So let's turn this off and go look at the cell itself.
Welcome to the man cave. We got fun and games.
Ah, hello James. Welcome to the dyno cell.
Now, the last time we saw this, it was literally stacked up on a trailer.
It's weird in here. It does strange things to your ears.
It feels like you've been muffled, like your head is like got a big woolly hat on or something like that.
It does, because it kills the sound. I mean, it's not soundproof. If you're in here and people make noise outside, you hear it. All these panels, they're all back together. The louver shutters are in. That's the air intake to the cell. We haven't yet taken the window out and put the louvers in. Obviously, there's the other end of the exhaust extraction. Last time we spoke, we'd only just knocked a hole in the wall, and all of this was in a big pile outside. We haven't quite made it to the roof yet. We've got about another 1.25 meters yet, and then we burst through the roof to the heavens above. And once we've done that, that's the exhaust extraction completed. The blue section up there is contains a huge great fan that will extract air from the cell along with necessary exhaust gases. What looks like a pile of pallet racking will be the cooling system for the dyno. We've got 4,000 litre IBCs lined up to store water. One it uses as a load, like a water wheel in reverse, to brake the engine. So that needs water. Obviously that warms the water up in the doing so, because you're dissipating the power of the engine into water, which becomes heat. So that heats the water, but also the same water is used as cooling for the engine. So the longer you run the engine, the more heat you make. In this setup, we're not going to have any means to externally cool the water. So we've just got to rely on having a large volume of it. And I figure 4,000 litres should do us for a while. Yeah, that's the exhaust extraction. When I say exhaust extraction, we don't actually have an extractor just for exhaust as such. When you're testing an engine, you'll monitor its output on the air-fuel ratios, you don't actually want anything sucking on the exhaust. So the exhaust naturally comes out, you pipe it into this, which is a huge silencer, it then finds its way up those pipes and just gets sucked up the chimney with the rest of the air that's being drawn through the cell. The idea being air comes in here, goes out there, engine's in the middle, so it's always on a stream of fresh air. The cart itself has now been updated in that it's now running all the electrics that went with the console. That is a load cell, and essentially what happens is the engine turns that shaft there, water's fed in here, there's a water brake in there that tries to stop the engine. That tries to twist it and puts a load on there, and that measures load. So that gives you a torque figure, and because you know the speed, you know the engine power. So I'm refreshing certain parts of the cart. At the moment I'm working on the fuel supply, pumps and filters. It will need to have two different sorts of fuel pump, one to cope with carburetor engines, one to cope with fuel injected engines. There's the cooling tower. That tray normally sits in the bottom as a drip tray. In the bottom of the cart here, we've got a heat exchanger. So we can plumb the engine's oil system to it and control the engine's oil temperature, as well as controlling its water temperature. Those are the connections that connect the cart to the control console outside. Oil filter for the heat exchanger, and obviously battery and a master on-off switch. So it's not working yet, but it's getting closer.
It's in a lot less pieces than it was.
It's in a lot less pieces. I'm much more hopeful it's going to work and produce some meaningful numbers rather than being a very expensive ornament. But it's principally there. At this stage, to make it work, I need the new load cell to arrive from America. I've got to fiddle about with the throttle linkage, make some adapters so we can put bell housings on there, bit of tidying up. The biggest thing we've got left to do is to install the 4 IBCs and the 2 huge water pumps that will circulate the coolant around the system. Do that part. I need my electrician friends to come in and do lots of wiring.
We're obviously documenting the build of this 30-plus-year-old dyno to get it up and running, but it's not just about documenting the build. You're also really excited to have different types of engines and things that you don't actually see a lot of online. What are you most looking forward to running on the dyno?
Principally, what I'm most looking forward to doing with this is having a working dyno. Primarily, it's to work on and develop whatever engine I'm developing, be it whether it's for my own race car or somebody else's. I find every time I take a car to a rolling road session, it's frustrating because we always run out of time, or we can't try various things that I want to do simply because of time constraints, or the operator's not interested. And not only that, there is a cost and time implication. But if you've got an engine mounted here, you can test away to your heart's content. You can try things that people say probably won't work, and it doesn't cost you anything to try. In terms of the engines I'm looking to put on here, primarily it's those that I build, it's those that I'm interested in. It's old BMW engines and old Ford engines because they are primarily where my interest lies. There's very little online of these engines, but also what I'd like to do is document a lot of the testing of things we know. Back in the 1980s, everyone said a 38D gas carb was the best thing ever to put on a standard Ford Pinto. There's still a debate raging about that now, but it's by and large the theory that that was a good thing to do has been disproved. But I'd like to show it for myself. I'd like to prove it for myself. If I remember back, there used to be numerous modifications that all meant to be, you need to do this, that's worth 10 horsepower, and you need to do that, that's worth 20 horsepower, and you need to do this, and this is worth that, and they can't have been. I don't want to do a bit of myth busting. Let's see what really works. So actually, we're not quite finished. There's a bit of time lapse going on, because you might notice I'm now clean shaven. It's 2 weeks since we did the last clip. We've now got a mini update. Had a delivery from America. Exciting. New filter for the absorber, and one of the critical bits to how the system works, a load cell. When the engine's on the dyno, spinning round, it pulls all this round, stretches this, which reads a load. The control unit then takes that load along with the speed, turns it into power figures. So hideously expensive, but necessary and very important. But it has caused us a bit of a glitch on a learning curve. Oh, excellent. Right, that is live data. It's not actually doing anything, but that is live data that this is seeing from that. This for me was pretty exciting when I got my parcel from America, because it got us the load cell. And the load cell, I thought, well, hey, we're on the way to making this thing work. So once you fit the load cell, we then need to hang weights on the dyno, take voltage readings, and with a tiny little screwdriver, go in the back of the console and adjust various voltages to get the correct readings. And then we go in the cell and we hang weights on calibration arms, which I'm going to show you in a second, which turned out to be more complicated than it was originally expected. And hey presto, we're away. But none of the numbers made sense. We were getting torque figures out the console, but they weren't what I expected. And there's multiple reasons for that. Partly down to the fact that we don't technically have the correct calibration arm for this power absorber. We've got an arm for an 833. We've got the bigger 871. So one arm doesn't fit. And the other arm we have got, it's the correct length, but it's different. Because of the way Superflow calibrate them, the calibration arm is a known weight. Well, the arm we've got that does fit has been made differently. But now I've got my head around it, and I've got my head around the maths. So what with that and confusing metric and imperial measurements, it took me a while to suss out what was going on. The slight fly in the ointment is that this console that came from Connell used a beam type load cell, and we have a dog bone load cell. I kind of hope that the guys at Superflow would have took a little bit more notice of my emails, because what we've now got is a load cell that's compatible with the dyno absorber, but not the console. I much would have rather had it the other way round, because that's easy for me to make a mechanical modification to the absorber. It's much more difficult for me to change the console. And to make the console read correct for the load cell we have, I need to change some of the resistors on it. R80 and R79, and there's one up there that also needs changing. I'm quite handy with a soldering iron, but these things are nearly £2 a pop. I don't fancy attacking one with a soldering iron. I do actually have several. Unfortunately, none of them have got the right resistors on. So I've ordered some resistors. I'm going to get my soldering iron out and pray that it's all going to work well. We did have a little bit of success though, in that after fumbling around with numerous cables, we've got the ancient computer running ancient Windows XP up and running, but the computer is now seeing live data from the dyno. It's not hooked up, it can't show you much at the moment, but obviously we can see it's reading air temperature, because we've got an air temperature probe plugged in. If I go and plug a water temperature sensor in, if it's working correctly, we should now have some water temperatures. And if I briefly hit the starter button, we'll see an engine speed. There we go. So at this point, the Windyne software is talking to the dyno. Happy days. And we're in a position now where once we're sorted, we can produce graphs and actually show data. Calibration. As I said earlier, we fitted a new load cell and I started to calibrate all the electronics and the voltages, and all appeared to be good until I came in here and tried to hang some weight on it. In theory, it's simple to calibrate one of these, and I'll talk you through what's supposed to happen. You take this calibration arm, it bolts to the back of the absorber, and if you set everything up right there, it should read 17 pound-foot of torque on the display, because that's what this will do. If that's all good, what you then do, you hang weight on here to simulate the kind of torque that you expect your engine to produce. This will handle anything from 30 pound-foot of torque to 1,000. And obviously you want to calibrate it within the region of what you're doing. If you're testing engines that are making 900 pound-foot of torque, you don't calibrate it with only 17 pound. So on the basis most engines we're likely to run will make, say, 180 pound-foot. We want about 180 pound-foot when we calibrate it. If we then hang 50 pound of weight on there, because we've got a 3-foot length, 50 pound times 3 is 150, plus the 17, we're 167. So we're close to what we'd expect our engine to make. But I wasn't getting the numbers I was expecting. Firstly, because this doesn't actually fit our dyno. This is because this is a calibration bar for the smaller 833 absorber. We don't have that one. We have its big brother. So the calibration bar we have is this here long fella, which isn't the same as Superflow's. But on the face of it, it seems correct. Bear in mind, we know this was used with the dyno before. So I thought, yeah, okay, we bolt that on there. Handily, this bit says 17 pounds. So I thought, yeah, right. So we then put that on there. It should read 17 pound. It doesn't. And here's where the head scratching starts. Partly because our console reads in Newton meters, so we've got to do some maths to make it correct. But the numbers still didn't add up. And it took me a long while to figure out why. This beam doesn't actually weigh 17 pound. I don't know what it actually weighs, but Superflow know when you bolt this on, it reads 17 pound. Well, what we have here is a beam that goes right the way across, so it's actually equally balanced. As far as the absorber is concerned, the beam doesn't weigh anything. We do have 17 pound, but it's right on the end. So it won't read 17 pound. It will read 17 times 3, converted to Newton meters. But that still didn't add up. After a lot of head scratching, emails to America, I finally realised what was going on. Because at the end of the calibration instructions from America, there was a whole bit about changing resistors on those boards I showed you, which aren't in anything I've got. So, hence the fact that we've moved a little bit further forward and a little bit back. But the beauty is I've had to think about it long and hard, and I actually have a much better understanding of what's involved in calibrating this thing now. So for the last of today's update, we're going to go outside and look at big bits of pipe and talk about water. So down here we have perhaps the heart of the cooling system, the pumps. 2 pumps, a supply pump and a scavenge pump. So they're roughly where they're going to end up, and there will be pipes going through the exhaust extraction into the back of the cell where they can hook up. And where do the pumps get their water from? The IBCs. Currently, we've only got 2 out of the 4. I'll answer the first question, which would be, why 4? Well, we could make do with 1, but the issue we have is that we have no means to cool the water, and the water gets warmed up by 2 purposes. Obviously, the absorber is a brake, and effectively it's converting engine power to heat. The water is also heated by its secondary function of cooling the engine. We have no external means of cooling it. We don't have an external radiator, so all we can do is have a large quantity of water. So we've got roughly 4,000 litres. My friends over at Emerald, they've got a 1,000-gallon water tank, and Philip Connell has 5,000 litres. But Philip Connell, who used to own that console, he even ran F1 engines on there. So I figured that 4,000 litres will be enough for us. So effectively, the hot water coming in will get well and truly mixed up, and any sediment, if it doesn't end up trapped in that tank, will end up trapped in that tank. So what we won't be doing is sending sediment back to the absorber, blocking up that nice clean filter that I showed you earlier.
Clean versus dirty.
More excitement. We've got the last bits of the chimney now. The flashing, the roof bit, the bit at the top of the roof, commonly called a Chineman's hat, and a big bit of pipe that we've got to cut down. That's it for this mini update. Obviously lots of bits, plumbing, the electric still to come. Not sure when that's going to happen. Leaning on the cart itself reminds me I still need to finish off sorting fuel pumps and a supply for the engine. We're starting to amass bell housings and manifolds and engine parts with a view to actually testing engines. So far I've got as far as we now have a full bell housing that's actually correctly mounted to the absorber, such as the full crossflow that's in our other videos and the Lotus twin cam. They could now be bolted onto this, but obviously we still need to source induction and exhaust systems and mount things like ignition coils to make the engines fully workable on here. But we've more than broken the back of the progress, so stay tuned. If you like what you saw or you're interested in seeing more, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified of any further updates.